Some rides are popular and some rides are iconic, but these rides all changed theme parks. Not every ride on this list is a first of its kind, but it either changed the direction of a park or the industry as a whole. Right, so the first coaster on this list is the Corkscrew at Alton Towers. Now, you might think there's nothing spectacular about this one. It is just a Vekoma looping coaster. There are a few of them kicking around. But this one put Alton Towers on the map, because in 1980, this is when Alton Towers really became a theme park. Yes, it had some travelling rides beforehand, but this was their first permanent installation and really put them on the map. And of course, it was so iconic that to this day, the Corkscrew itself still remains at the entrance to the park, and this year got a glow up when it returned to its original colour scheme. Right, next up, heading to a park that is dear to my heart, and that is the big one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. No surprises for this one, because this completely changed the skyline of Blackpool, and at the time when it opened in 1994, it was a world record breaker. It was the tallest coaster anywhere in the world. Now, of course, that has been significantly beaten over the years, but it was the tallest in the UK until recently when Hyperia came along. Here's the weird thing. If you've ever seen the footage of Geoffrey Thompson, he said he went out to Cedar Point and he rode Magnum XL and he went, I want one of those and I want it bigger and better.
Well, about 4 years ago, I rode on what was then the tallest roller coaster in the world, which is an amusement park called Cedar Point in Ohio. It was a first roller coaster at 200 feet, and it was just the most amazing roller coaster I have ever been on in my life. It was just enormous, and the first drop was just spectacular. And I said, we must have one of these, but if it's in Blackpool, we'll make it bigger.
Well, I've rode Magnum XL, and he didn't get bigger and better. He may have got taller, but it is not better. Magnum XL is a fantastic coaster. The big one is okay, the first drop is fantastic, and then it kind of does not very much after that. So it's nonetheless a very important coaster, and of course Blackpool would not be what it is without that on the skyline. Right, we're heading back to Alton Towers now for the next coaster, and that is Nemesis. This one was a little bit special simply because it forced the park to think about things a little bit differently. Because as I'm sure you all know, Alton Towers is cursed with this height restriction that they cannot go above the tree line. So what did they do? Well, they just blew up a massive hole and went further into the ground instead. And that led to quite a spectacular coaster that hugs the terrain. Now, of course, the coaster has been retracked in recent years, and there's a lot of debate about whether it was worth it or whether it's actually any better or worse than its predecessor. B&M aren't quite the same manufacturer as they were back in 1994. Nonetheless, it was a very iconic coaster, and of course it is still in the park to this day. Right, another coaster from a Merlin park, this time down at Thorpe, was Colossus. Now, when this opened, it was the first coaster to have 10 inversions. Now, of course, this model itself has been replicated a few times since then. Of course, in Flamingo Land we have Sick, which is a slightly modified version of it, but largely the same layout. Nonetheless, this was impressive at the time when it opened to have 10 inversions in one coaster. The problem with this coaster, of course, is those trains. They are not great, they're not the most comfortable. I have heard people saying front row is the best place to ride it, so maybe next time I'm down there I'll give that a shot. But nonetheless, this was a record breaker, and it was here in the UK. You're going to see me bounce back and forward between a couple of parks here, because two parks have been responsible for quite a lot of important things, and the next one is back at Blackpool Pleasure Beach with the Ghost Train. Now, the Ghost Train at Blackpool Pleasure Beach is credited as being the first ghost train in the world. Now, if you've heard the park talk about this, and I have on many behind-the-scenes tours, effectively, at that time in history, there was lots of pretzel rides, and it was called a pretzel simply because of the track layout. Of course, pretzel here in the UK didn't mean a huge amount back then, so the ride itself wasn't doing particularly spectacular. However, there was a movie out at that time called The Ghost Train, and well, they decided to retheme this attraction into the Ghost Train, put scary kind of props all around it, etc., and that is the birth of the modern Ghost Train. Of course, there are many of these around the world, and everyone will have their favourites, and there are definitely some scarier ones than the one in Blackpool, and there are some less impressive ones, but nonetheless, the one at Blackpool put the ride type on the map. So another ride that's in the same park is kind of divisive amongst many. Some people are huge fans of them. Jonathan, I'm looking at you, and others less so. Probably me, and that is Valhalla. Now, this was a rather impressive dark war ride when it opened in the year 2000. It was on a scale that we hadn't really seen. Yes, okay, Universal and Disney may have done some larger rides, but for a smaller kind of amusement park, effectively, to put a ride in of this kind of caliber was something else. Of course, a couple of years ago, the park reimagined the ride. Took a lot longer than anybody expected because, well, 2020 hit and we all know what happened there. And there are still fans who prefer the original versions. There are those who prefer the new versions. The only problem I have with this ride is its location. I mean, I love Blackpool to bits, but they don't have the best climate. And this is not a ride that gets you slightly wet. This is a ride that is guaranteed to soak you. So in Florida or Spain, this ride would make a lot more sense. But nonetheless, it has won numerous awards over the years, including when it was closed, which is rather impressive. So another important ride here in the UK. One of the things that Alton Towers did a lot of in the 90s and 2000s was world's firsts. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing depending on how you look at it. Because the problem is, when you are the first, you're almost guaranteed not to be the best. And there's a couple of coasters that fall into this category. The first one is Oblivion. Now, this was the first B&M dive coaster. Of course, it was credited with being a vertical drop, and if you know the technicalities, it isn't quite vertical. It's something like 87.5 degrees, it's not 90. There are steeper ones since then, there are bigger ones since then, there are longer tracks since then with more elements. So this, as a prototype, proved the point. It was the first time we'd seen a train of that kind of configuration. It's a wide train with 2 rows. Typically they're the other way around, they're narrow and they're long, but of course to get that kind of suspense element hanging over the edge, they had to redesign things. So for that, it is fantastic, and I have done 4 or 5 dive coasters around the world. I still think Oblivion has one of the most impressive drops. That drop into that tunnel is fantastic every single time. It is just a shame that there's nothing after that. So nonetheless, it was an important coaster because it spawned on all the other B&M dive coasters around the world. We're going to stick with Alton Towers for another first. This is a weird one because the ride in question is 13, and if you know anything about the marketing of this ride at the time, it was marketed as this almost like a horror coaster. It was going to be absolutely terrifying, you'd only be able to ride it once, you'd need to sign a waiver, all this kind of thing. It's a family coaster. It's good, don't get me wrong, I enjoy 13, but you know, I think despite how good Alton Towers' marketing team is, I think they lost the mark on this one and just kind of went a little bit over the top. In any case, this was the first time we had seen a drop track on a coaster. And it led to Intamin kind of doing the multi-dimension coaster, of which there have been many more since. So it is a decent coaster, it is not the best coaster by any stretch of the imagination, and again, the problem being the prototype is all its successors were better than it. But nonetheless, it was the first of its kind, so therefore it's on this list. This next one's weird, because it's kind of the first and not the first at the same time. It is Galactica, or Air, depending on what you want to call it, and it was classed as the world's first flying coaster, which is a little bit of a stretch of the imagination because there were flying coasters before it. It was the first one that became popular and kind of led to more of them, yes. But so if you've done Galactica, you know how it works, right? The B&M mechanism is you sit in the coaster and then the seats kind of get lifted up and then you're dangling. Well, Vekoma had a version prior to that called the Flying Dutchman, but it was weird because you sat in the seats and then the seats kind of reclined so that you were lying on your back in the station. So you weren't dangling, so you didn't have that whole kind of gravity thing going on, but that was just weird. I almost got on one of these in America, packed in literally about 2 trains before I got on it, and then never reopened that day, so I'm gutted it's now been removed. But even before that, there was a little coaster in Manchester in Granada Studios called Skytrack. Now this was a single person flying coaster, and I went on it as a kid. But nonetheless, the kind of Galactica B&M version is credited as being the one that kind of started the flying coasters. Of course, nowadays we have the modern version with Vekoma's flyer in Phantasialand, which is just buttery smooth and an excellent loading procedure. I'm assuming that that's on some kind of exclusivity for a few years, and hopefully we'll see some parks bring more of these out because they are excellent. But Galactica is still an important coaster. And sticking with towers, as I say, whilst I think the world's first thing may not have been the most sensible suggestion for them, because now a lot of the rides are coming to end of life. The next one they had was the Smiler, which of course was and is the world's most inversions on a coaster. And I'm sure there was a story where John Wardley said they'd obviously done Colossus, which was 10 inversions. I think the Chinese did an 11. They didn't want to just beat it and do 12, but they couldn't do 13 because they just launched a coaster called 13, and so that's why they went with 14. Interesting story. I'm sure there's some truth behind that. I think the thing for me with Smiler, it's obviously not been beat. I don't think it will be beat anytime soon, if ever, because I don't think that is a goal that parks are going for these days. Like, oh, let's get the most inversions. It's an engineering marvel, let's be fair, right? To compress 14 inversions into such a tight space is really, really impressive. And it's an odd ride because you can have some fairly comfortable rides on it. You can have some absolute headbangers on it. I don't know if it depends on the train, the position in the train, both. I've heard people saying that it's smoother this season. I went on it on opening day. I didn't think so. But I will get back on it again this season and see what it's like. But in any case, it's still an impressive coaster because it really did push the boundaries from an engineering point of view. Right, well, there's a selection of 10 rides that were important either for the park themselves or indeed the industry as a whole. I'm sure there are many, many more, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on both the 10 that I have listed and indeed any rides that I have not included in this list. If you've enjoyed this one, make sure you hit that like button and do subscribe. As always, I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios. Some rides are popular, some rides are iconic. Sometimes I forget what I'm saying. Some rides are popular, some rides are iconic, but these rides change theme parks for every. Some rides are popular, some rides are iconic, but these rides all changed something. Not every ride on this list is the first of its kind, but every one of them did something. Some rides are popular, some rides are iconic, but these rides changed theme parks forever. Not every ride on this list is a first of a blah, 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 blah. Some rides are popular and some rides are iconic, but every time I say this, I get it wrong. But it was mainly kind of just that, something else. You think I would know Alton Towers, for sake. Right, another Merlin coaster that put things, did it? I don't know what it did. It changed the industry in that respect. Did it? And then the thing is kind of lifted up backwards and you're kind of dangling. Well, the B&M, no, that's not what I said. Muppet.